thank you so much for giving me your time today. I'm really happy to see so many of you here. So my name is Dafna Aaronson. I'm a sports psychology consultant, and I have an HR consulting partnership. And what I do with teams is help them maximize performance. Well, how do I do that? There's the more typical mental skills, sports psych things that you're thinking of that I do. However, what I really find interesting and my passion now is connecting my previous people analytics background and connecting it to the sports world. So when we think of sports analytics, typically we are thinking of the new data, how to slice and dice what's on the back of the trading card. Well, what I do is focus on the analytics of the front of the trading card, who that person is, what we can understand about their personality, their behavior, that gives us a comprehensive look to understand if, why, and how they can be successful in the current environment. So this topic and what we just heard from Stella and what we've been hearing the past 2 days, it just all blends right in. And the blessing and curse of going at the end is I hear so many ideas from the other speakers that I want to infuse, and the curse is now it's just going to sound like garbage. But I'm going to try to keep it cohesive and still bring in some of these other concepts, and I'm sure you'll naturally figure it out too. So my goals for today are really to help introduce the concept of teamwork and cohesion, but from the sports psychology side of it, so understand some basic concepts and theories. If we have time, we'll try a short activity, but if not, we'll flip it. And then to go through a little bit of reflection, watching a couple of vignettes, so you can understand how to apply some of these methods back in your own places of work. Finally, there's an intersection with AI in here. So how I actually apply machine learning to debias the personality side of it and attach it to the performance metrics and really help understand prescriptively what the resources are we need to put in place to help these athletes really self-actualize as people and obviously on the field as well. So one of the big themes in sports is controllables. I mean, I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase control the controllables. And it seems simple in theory, but it's actually really difficult to focus on. So in sports, an example of uncontrollables. So I work with baseball teams, and you get out there and you can't control the weather. You can't control your opponents. You can't control what the umpire is doing. But yet all of that feeds into our response to that stimuli, creating some anxiety and affecting our performance. Well, what is in our control there? The attitude, right? The attitude, which is our behavior stemming from thoughts and feelings of how we're going to respond to that. So from a team perspective, this goes to that us versus them mentality a little bit, where, and from the teamwork perspective, when we're looking at what can you control in the team environment, right? What are your controllables in getting this table to come together as a team? Maybe they've never met each other before. They come from different places, right? So and we heard Aaron talk about that idea of friend versus foe, and that comes from that biological, psychology of when you're growing up and you develop those attachment theories, you recognize faces as familiar. When you move into a different environment and you see a different face, that triggers that us versus them, and now it's, what is that stimulus? My thought is, do I recognize this person? Are they familiar for me? The mapping from my years of growth say either yes or no. And now my response is, you're a friend or a foe. So we want to think of a team as this collective, and that's the us, and the externals are the them. But really we have to focus on building that us in the first place. So just to start it off, I want to take a look at this vignette from the movie The Internship. And as we're watching it, just think about what you're noticing from a team perspective, teamwork perspective, and we'll discuss it after.
Come on, guys, let's brainstorm this puppy.
We're gonna put the coffee in the pot and we're gonna let it percolate.
I think it'll be helpful to explore what apps have been most popular.
Go backwards to go forwards.
Oh, and we could bin it, you know?
Fall out.
Or categorize needle movers by type of user.
All right, guys, I don't want to kill the momentum or the mojo that you have cooking, but to be fair with you, needles and categories, they don't use apps. People use apps. So I have an idea. Nowadays, people are taking pictures, right? They have their phones now. They're out. Something catches their eye. They want to take it, but then the photo's just sitting there. What if they take that photo and instantaneously put it out there on the line and they share it with their friends?
That's Instagram. It already exists. It's one of the most popular apps in the world. Facebook bought them for like $1 billion.
Oh, no. Mine is very different than that.
How is yours something very different from that?
Because on mine, you're taking the photo instantaneously, you're putting the photo out there on the line.
Is it online?
Yeah, I'm putting my photos out on the line and I'm creating an exchange.
Yeah, that's Instagram.
But mine's more of a social sharing on the line that's happening.
Online.
Quick interjection. When you keep saying on the line, you do mean online.
Stuart, you don't do that to a man. He's got $1 million idea right here.
$1 billion idea.
Even better, let him flow.
Okay, that's all fine, but he's talking about something already invented.
Okay. So let's just reflect for a little bit. There's a lot. You can literally watch that whole movie and that would be the talk in a nutshell as well. How many of you would be horrified to sort of see this interaction in your place of work? All right, couple hands. How many of you have experienced at one point or another this sort of interaction in their place of work? Okay, so when you were watching it, through which lens, which character lens were you seeing yourself in? And I'm just going to call it out, if you don't mind sharing. What did you see as the challenge going on here? Or I'm just going to go Socratic method. What did you see as the challenge? Yeah.
Oh, bridging the gap between the two. Seems like, I would say bridging the gap. They're like, they're talking past each other.
Okay, so communication gap?
Yes.
Okay, and I think from some of the other comments, there was an age gap, right? There might have been the challenge there. Did anyone watch this and say, yeah, there's a couple negative things, but there's some positive in there too? Did anyone feel anything positive from there? Show of hands. Yeah, you guys did. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, when there was a little bit of that, I got your back, right, between the two characters. And it's not all bad, right? And the truth is there's no right or wrong. There's a lot that you can see into it because we're all coming from different backgrounds, contexts. And so that is why it's important to actually establish your team in a cohesive manner from the start, or really once you notice that something's dysfunctional, if you didn't do it in the first place. So, similar to your work environment, in the locker room, you have no choice. You can't pick your team. You're looking at age gaps. You're looking at language barriers. You're looking at a variety of education levels. You are looking at people from different parts of the country and from other countries. So you think, hey, you got drafted on this team. You're now on a team and you have the same outcome goal, which is let's win the World Series. Well, that's just because you all have that same goal doesn't make you a team. And so that gets into, well, then what is a team? So what is the difference between a team and a group of individuals? And so pitchers often think that they can operate, that they have a different game, they are part of a team, but because they do their work, it's independent of everyone else, that it's somewhat of an individual sport for them. In fact, a lot of baseball players will tell you, because of the farm system, that as much as it seems like a team sport, it's actually an individual sport. And you can sort of justify the mindset, but it's not the case, right? Because you do have to work together in order to do what your role is necessary that no one else can control. So a team actually, they have norms that regulate behavior. There's an interdependence. There's a sense of family, and they have defined roles that are all aimed towards a common goal. So those are the principles of teamwork. And if you stop and think about how your team was set up, what it was like when you entered, maybe what it was like now, not necessarily enterprise-wise, but yours specifically, do you feel like there are norms that sort of regulate the behavior? That there are defined roles, that there's interdependence, that everyone's sort of agreement on the goal, and that there's this sense of family, which, again, is another way of thinking of the us. So there's 4 stages to teamwork. There's the forming stage, the storming, norming, and performing. So what is that? The forming stage is where everyone's getting familiar with each other, you're getting to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you're coming up with your goals, right? Oh my gosh, what a great place to include some teamwork. So I often will, and sometimes you think, all right, you're mid-season, when can you do it? Anytime there's something new, anytime there's a break. So me coming in is a new opportunity, even if the team has been together. A new player coming up, that's an opportunity, even if we're partway through the season. At that point, it's important to start the team building using the essence of some of what we've heard already today, which is this concept of communicating to build the relationship and rapport. So we do that by by connecting with each other's thoughts, right? So the different things that I go in there and do, depending on time and what I'm noticing, starts with everyone explaining their why. Why are you here? And it seems like an easy question, but when you're sitting around, and I've only really worked with male teams, so if I have a basketball team and we're all sitting around in a circle, everyone sort of thinks off the top of their, because I love basketball, because it's a lot of extrinsic things that are very surface level. So I usually start and I talk about why I'm there and what got me to there. 30 seconds, 45 seconds, doesn't always break the ice. However, by the third person, if it hasn't started already, people are really getting into their motivators, their drivers, these things that are the qualitative part of what builds their passion for playing the game. So talking about the environment they grew up in, talking about the relationships they have. And from that moment, I've never not had this happen, where at least 4 or 5 in, you hear people nodding, you see people nodding. You find that one person takes a piece of what someone else says and adds on to it. And so these people that you had these surface level connections with because you want to go win the championship, now you have a deeper connection right from that moment. Something that connects you, that you trust, that can allow you to do more when that's the harder thing to do. So that's, in that forming stage, and when those opportunities are there, it's really important to create the environment where you can start understanding what the why is. And then the next step is looking at motivation. So motivation, the theories of motivation, where's the control, where's the autonomy, where's the relatedness? And that is all going to impact, those answers are all going to impact these thoughts, feelings, and then the outcome behavior. So there's also performance motivation, right? So it's what is your expectation when you do what you think is expected of you? Or do you value what the result is? Is that enough to get you to do it again? And we can start to look at different aspects of psychology and filter it back up into understanding each other on a human level, the whole person, not just what we believe to be what's on the outside. The storming stage is a little bit of what we saw here. I mean, it was benign, is where people, there's conflict, right? You're looking at resistance, maybe vying for some positions, just unhappy, whether it's with management or with people next to you. Still, there's an appropriate time to do it then. There's not one stage that you wouldn't want to start the team building. So if someone's thinking about, well, I can't because right now we don't have a manager, or we're a small team, or we're going through a reorg, it doesn't matter. Third stage is norming. So that's when things start to get into a little bit of flow. So you're looking at hostility being replaced by unity, and people really being able to do conflict resolution, and there's just less of it happening. But that's different than performing, right? Because performing is really where everyone's at that same goal, right? We're now focused on problem solving so we can get to our end game. And that's just because things are going well, even really well, it's good to reconnect to that. That's actually a really important time. Like those peaks and valleys are good times to reconnect and go back to that passion, that joy, that X factor that got you to where you are and really motivates you to continue doing the hard work. So you get some teamwork, but you need the cohesion. And so there's 4 major correlates. And as you can tell, like, there's a lot of subjectivity in there, right? You're looking at things that you don't have a lot of control in. So we go back and we say, all right, if our big thing is control, we're looking at getting control over these so that we can moderate these into performance excellence. So when it comes to how you create cohesion and you're creating that glue and bond, it's understanding what you can actually do and not what you wish you could do in order to facilitate. And it can be really small things. And it's not always the same thing. So it could be a piece of it. But the idea is teamwork's great, but you got to add that little extra sauce that creates the cohesion. And so one of the ways that I look, we're going to skip that for now. One of the ways that I look to do that is actually giving them more information, understanding who the people are that are sitting at your table, and having a way to engage that at the human level without necessarily having to take up so much time and effort. And, you know, some of us are introverted, so it's hard to really open up. So personality and psychology. So this is where I love this stuff. I find it super fascinating. And we'll start on the psychology side. So, you know, I've got thoughts, feelings, and behavior up here. And we just spoke about how that breaks down into your motivation, performance, and your overall desire to continue down the road without sort of making up an excuse, right? Like sometimes we become complacent. We got enough money, we made it far enough. You sort of know you're not done, but you're okay saying that this is good enough, right? And we become complacent, we can skate off, but it doesn't help anyone around us. The second piece to this is really understanding the context. So you can have that understanding of what like the makeup is of someone, but if you don't understand how that came to be and it became an expression of their personality, then it doesn't matter. And now you're not really understanding them. Now you're going into assumptions. So uncovering some of the context by which you had your relationships, by which you grew up in different environments, helps us address the unconscious biases, right? I mean, that was mentioned a lot here today. So getting that at the forefront before someone comes in the door, or at least making it an opportunity relatively quickly thereafter. So in the sports world, it's done through the draft. And if they are drafted, then, or in the baseball world, if they are drafted, then they come in and oftentimes they just do a quick check-in. So that's, there's a couple opportunities. The key is to make it consistent for everybody. But that's organization. In the corporate setting, in the recruiting side of things, we're going to get into the technology in a minute, but there are other technologies that we saw today that can really start to give us a better understanding of who we're looking for, who are we attracting, are we getting the right people through the door, and what are we going to do with them when they come in? Do we really know that this person is a strong leader for the right reasons? Do we really understand how to promote those leadership skills or those other skills that we see as maybe on the fence, maybe needs a little bit of help, or even strong? The only way to really understand how it's going to work for person A versus person B, you can't create a template. You're never going to, have 100 columns and say, oh, this is the matrix and they fit into this bucket. You have to take the time to actually do the right qualitative interview. And so that's, a lot of people, and that's just the work it takes to put together an interview. So for scouts, putting together an interview where they're asking questions that aren't obvious to answer. And I just think that is a redesign of some of what's going on in corporate world. So it's a redesign of how we think recruiters, what their responsibilities are, how we can empower them to actually be more efficient and come to some stronger insights, and how we can actually, for the candidates, empower them to really understand if this is a place they want to be. So that's on that psychology side. On the personality side, so the 5-factor model is widely regarded as the standard now in the field. And that is 5 factors of the acronym is OCEAN: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Okay, so what do we do with that, right? There's obviously sub-facets to each of them, and there's some interplay, so are you ever going to get a direct hit? Probably not, but that's why we supplement it with the interview. So that interdependence, right, is what leads us to the thoughts. So at that moment, you're connecting that personality with the psychology. And that intersection is what I'm now using machine learning to help do, and do it in a debiased way. The application, so for example, I'll go back to baseball. Scouts, as you may know, are on the road. They see about 1,200 plus, athletes, and you can get rid of a handful, but not a meaningfully significant number. So if you can better understand personality and the fit of that front of the card and the levers that you might want to know that you're going to have to deal with once they're inside, then you can really make an assessment, and the machine learning helps actually get it down to a much more manageable number where they're spending less time on the road, their quality of life is better, they're also targeting the right athletes, and now they're able to understand what the better questions are to ask, but given their skill set, you try to let them do their thing. So once you get that and you got your drafts, well, now you have all this rich data, information that goes into player development. It goes into mental skills. It goes into athletic trainers. And it helps them not only build their relationships and communication faster, but it actually helps them build the player profile plans, like something very specific. Again, we always try to look at how we're going to develop them as athletes through the performance side, but the only way we're going to do that is if we understand what the best angle is to come at them from the human side, the psychology side. And I sort of see a very similar parallel in corporate. You can get recruiting to look at, I know a big problem, and there's a lot of different ways of dealing with it, is, how do you get the resumes down? All right, so let's say you take care of that. Still, recruiters are important, and they should have a face. You should have a face, right? As per Aaron's thing, you need the face-to-face communication. But what are they really collecting? Are they collecting anything that we can then go put inside the company and do some of these things the way Stella had been talking about? I think like almost everyone has been talking about how we get that data and look at the well-being metrics. So if you can get it from the onset, now you can start to build up the employee mobility. You can start to look at how learning and development can actually help self-actualize the potential of the people as a person, right? 90% of the players I meet with don't have performance issues. They have off-the-field issues. And employees can be similar to athletes in that regard. Like, there's a lot of stuff you bring into work that didn't come from work. The attitudes that we saw there, and even the body language, right? It's not necessarily, there's a frustration at a situation, something else. So the idea is, if you can understand, like, all right, listen, this guy came from a divorced family. Mother is an alcoholic. Or this guy, older brother, beaten by his father. I mean, not everything has to be tragic. This one is his mom was a professional athlete. So understanding what those, from a psychological perspective, understanding how those impacted through the qualitative interview some of these profiles, now we can start to get signals going. So I know that sounds a little bit, I'm going to say complicated. I'm going to take Stella's, we're going to say complicated. But it's the flow throughout, right? So if you're not going to ask those questions, you can't in corporate, but there are ways to design that interview. So once they're in, you know that this person, you're going to offer learning and development that is about the emotional quality, the well-being, and people are going to choose to do that and then reinvest back into the company through their performance. But rethinking that layer and not just making it about skills, not making just about performance reviews, which, by the way, is the next element that gets impacted by the data flow through. So where does the machine learning come in? So the machine learning really does help us identify if, when, and how someone is going to be successful in an environment, because we're looking at the whole person comprehensively and aligning the internal resources proactively, and obviously to maximize potential. So I don't know if that's really gonna, is there a way to get that bigger? Probably not, but, oh, there it is. Okay, so this three-dimensional box is a matrix where every blue dot is, let's just, in our case, an employee. And the three-axis is conscientiousness, agreeableness, and, nope, I want to get that to start again. There we go. And problem solving. So the research has demonstrated that those are the three character traits that we need to focus on in order for succession planning for Fortune 500 companies that are going to allow them to meet the demands and be successful, task-oriented in their new role. So what you're seeing here is the idea of if we can debias the relevant information, then how cool would it be to get this down from 1,200 to 13? And now we add that secondary layer of understanding different parts of their psychology to be able to say, okay, they're in here, how can we make them the best leader possible? Does anyone have any questions on that or anything else? So to me, the next stage as it relates to, let me get that off, as it relates to the corporate world is thinking about how we can use this information to create another form of network analysis, right? So there's O&A, but why not the personality network analysis? It could be noisy at first, but it's an interesting understanding and a different perspective in looking at well-being. That if you've got people who are high performers that demonstrate certain levels of character traits and through your assessment, then it's another way to see like how we actually want to grow the leadership and how your culture is really being reflected back. Also, it's a good check to see if your why is being met by the company's why, which tends to, once you get inside, go down a little bit. The second thing that I think is pretty cool is, agile teams, right? Everyone's sort of moving or thinking, is considering you've got buckets in the hierarchy. Well, a lot of people don't work that way anymore. So how can this data help you understand what the best team is and the balance that you need to create success? So, I'll be working with you on one project and our team is here, but I'm also working over there with another project and some other people. So how do we understand what the teamwork elements are that we're, instead of just throwing people together, we can be a little bit smarter about what we're doing. And at the end of the day, it is looking at what your layover test is. It's sort of saying, like, who are the people we want?
So who is our next applicant? Our two
because nobody would have
men.
taken these
So,
two.
what are we thinking? Dana?
You're kidding, right? No.
Eleanor?
They seem like really nice guys, but I don't think so.
Okay, moving on.
Can I say something?
You can, you will. We will resent you for wasting our time, but please don't let that stop you.
It's just diversity is in our DNA, right? I thought the goal here was to find people with a different way of thinking.
There's plenty of people with a different way of thinking. It doesn't mean that we have to hire them.
Very good point, Dana. Moving on.
I'm sorry, but you read their resumes, right? They have more years of sales and life experience than the age of most of our interns. Not to mention, our final judgment is always based on the layover test, right? Who would you rather be stuck next to at an airport bar for a 6-hour delay? The 10 millionth kid who knows that if you shrink, your strength to weight ratio allows you to jump way higher? Duh. Or the out-of-the-box thinkers who turn being stuck in a blender into an advantage.
So let's just be conscious of, are we really bringing in the right people and maximizing their potential? So any questions? Nope. Thank you for your time.